How's everybody doing tonight? Hope you're doing well. We're having this is our second in a series of events. I've got Ruwan here, who I've known for a number of years, and he's expert in men's sexuality and helping men develop their sexual energy and sexuality, which I talk about. It's so important that a lot of guys have neutered themselves. They won't bring their sexual energy to a conversation. And Ruwan, who also goes by Ruwando, Ruwando.com, is an expert in this area. And he's going to be a speaker at an event we're going to be having in Miami in November, December. And if you want, if you like the conversation, you want to see him live, we'll have some information on that event at the end of the conversation. But let's dive in. Let's get started. And I haven't seen Ruwan in a while. He's been traveling the world. He's been doing his stuff and hanging out in exotic places, which is awesome, and it's most people's dream, and he's actually living the dream life. And let's dive in. So the topic, men's sexuality. Can you share a little bit about what that means to you? Because for a lot of guys, that's abstract, right? It's really abstract. What does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I think I'm going to answer it backwards. I think thinking off the cuff, because I think there's a lot of talk around masculinity and what is being a man, and there's all these polarizing ideas, especially in the last year with a lot of the consent topics and whatnot, and toxic masculinity, and all this stuff that's being thrown around. But at its root, if you take away all the philosophy, what being a man is comes down to your sexuality. Like male and female are sexes. So even regardless of your orientation, like you can find your expression of manness or masculinity in your sexual behavior, in your sexual drive. Because if you don't have a sex drive, then you have no secondary sexual traits anymore. Sex is a sexual thing, right? So I think when a man is discovering his polarity, he's also discovering who he is as a person, because so much of our identity and our drive, and especially the subconscious urges, our instincts, come down to our sex drive.
Yeah, that's true. I find it's a fascinating topic for me because I find this to be the root, men's sexuality. Well, there was something I was discussing not too long ago, and I want to kind of dive right into it with you, with some of the clients and some of the coaches that we have here at Fearless, is that a lot of guys have a fear of talking to women and even approaching women, or even entering into a relationship or moving forward with women because of sexuality. The implied message, if I go up to a woman and say, hi, I want to get to know you, I'd love to take you out on a date, is there's an implied subtle message that I may want to fuck you. And it really comes down to that. And I think that when I think about approach anxiety, approach fear of talking to women, I think has a lot to do with it. Because I've noticed that fear starts to go away, the fear of approaching women, as men get more comfortable being a sexual being in front of women. But a lot of that fear starts to dissolve. And I've been watching this lately a lot, and going right after their fear of sex. And can you talk about that a little bit from your perspective?
Yeah, because I have a lot of guys reach out to me. I mean, this is a common thing you probably hear a lot. Like, how do I not be in the friend zone? Like, how do I escape the friend zone? How do I get her to see me as something more than a friend? And then you talk to these guys and have them break down their interactions with women, and they're basically trying to hide the fact that they're sexual. They're trying to find lines or ways to approach so they don't seem like they're a predator. They don't seem like they even have a dick. And then they wonder why women don't see them as sexual beings. Like, it's this is my concern with a lot of the cultural talk now around masculinity, that so many men who really mean well, and most nice guys are nice, right? Even nice guy syndrome isn't necessarily nice. Like, they mean well. Yeah. But they're robbing women of getting to know them as a man. Like, they're just being these like inert, androgynous, sterile beings. So I don't know. I forgot your question, but getting in touch with that is important if you want to connect with women, because women want to connect with men, right? If they're a straight woman, they want to be with someone with a cock and balls and has that drive to ravish them. And this is why we date in the first place.
It's absolutely why we date. It's a huge piece. There's other pieces too, of course, companionship and spending time with people. And you'll find some asexual people out there that really don't want to have sex. They just want to hang out with somebody. But that's not the majority of the world, and that's not the majority of the men that actually are into what we're talking about. Now, I want for people out there, because some people are actually thinking about, curious about getting to know you a little deeper, maybe even come to this live event that we're having. Can you talk a little bit about how you got into this and your history and your past, and because it's such a deep topic, it's such a powerful topic. I want people to understand how you really, how you came to know so much about it. And I personally want to understand a little more too. I know a lot about you, but I'd like to go take that a little deeper.
Yeah, totally. So I guess maybe 10 years ago, I got really into wanting to be better at life, right? So a lot of that was around socializing and women specifically. I was very shy, had very few women in my life. I was very awkward around people, lacked confidence. So, I sought out the things that most people seek out, most men seek out when developing themselves. And that brought me to a lot of dating advice, also brought me to spirituality on the side. But I was doing what most guys were doing around when the game came out, which was approach, learn all these lines, numb yourself out. My dating coach at the time actually was teaching me to desensitize myself. So I was going to the club, I could run these routines, I could make out with girls, but I was becoming number because I was putting up this front. And in retrospect, I think this is what led me to a lot of emotional distress, which actually showed up in the bedroom for me as erection issues. Like I was having erectile dysfunction at like 23, 24, despite being healthy. And I think it was because I was being so fake all the time. I was blocking my expression. I was running these routines without really feeling my own genuine desire for these women. So even if I brought a woman home who I objectively thought was hot, my body just wasn't there. Like my feelings were just not there. I was being a pickup robot, basically. And that forced me to get in touch with my feelings, or really it forced me to explore sexuality on a very intense level. I even left conventional work. I basically left my entire life to really figure this out because, I was so embarrassed in such like this existential crisis. And I realized that in order to get my sex drive back, I really had to explore my emotions, I had to explore my subconscious, I had to get in touch with vulnerability, and learn a bunch of sexual techniques, which are all tied together. Like your emotions and your sex life are so ingrained, and women know this intuitively. I think a lot of men need to learn how important the connection between sex and emotion is. And that's what led me on this path. And eventually, as I overcame my problems, I started helping guys and became, and here I am today, essentially.
So what you're saying is that, in your opinion, that a lot of the sexual dysfunction you experienced, or a lot of sexual dysfunction that a lot of men go through. Sorry, my dog is walking, making a lot of noise. Lie down. Lie down. Lie down. She's got her nails click on this floor. Lie down. Thank you. Okay. That's Nova, everybody, or Supernova. No, so what you're saying is that a lot of men who have problems in this area, sexual dysfunction, a lot of it has to do with intimacy and vulnerability for them, or actually connecting to the woman. And what is that for the guys out there? Because I guarantee you, I run into guys all the time that say, I can't keep an erection, or I'm numb. Like one of the ones I had when I started was I was really numb. I could keep an erection all day, but I couldn't feel any thing. So it kind of sucked. It was a superpower, and I could keep it all day because I couldn't feel. So it's great that I could keep it. I was just working up a storm, having sex, not having any pleasure. And it kind of sucked. So I realized there had to be more to sex there too. And a lot of that was intimacy for myself. Now, for the guys out there that are, and I know there's tons of guys with sexual dysfunction or that want to get better at sex and want to create even more pleasure, because you guys, and this is the next topic, is how far can the pleasure really go? Can you talk a little bit about that intimacy and that connection? What is it? How do you get it? How do you start developing it? Share a little about it.
Yeah, I've spoken about this before. So my view of energy is synonymous with feelings. Like when people talk about energy in a subjective sense, they're talking about things they feel, right? And our feelings, there's sensation, which we feel in the body. Arousal is a feeling. It's an energy, sexual energy, we call it sometimes. And emotions are feelings too. And they're really not that different. They're almost like, I view it as like gas to liquid, like with water. Like water vapor and water are the same thing, just in different phases. Like I really view sensation and emotion as similar, because Brene Brown talks about this, you can't selectively numb. And when you're numbing your emotions, eventually you're going to feel less in your body. And specifically with, I used to counsel couples. I stopped doing that because it was very stressful. But when I was counseling couples around their sexuality, 100% of the time, if they couldn't literally feel each other in bed, like they couldn't just get it up with each other. She couldn't, get aroused. He couldn't get aroused. It was almost always because of resentment. And resentment is feeling old feelings again. Like you're mad at him for not taking out the trash. You're mad at her for something she said at a cocktail party, and that you're stuck in those old emotions, so you can't feel current feelings, which is also sexual feelings. So back to your question, when guys are having that issue, I mean, in my case, I was blocking my softer emotions, but I've seen this also with guys who've reached out to me who are blocking their harder emotions. Like looking at we were talking about a few minutes ago, like a lot of guys are so afraid of being seen as a dominant male, or they have all these judgments around being like forthright and assertive and sexual, that when they're talking to women, they're basically cutting themselves off from the waist down. And of course, they're not going to be able to get it up. Like they've been acting like a boy all night. Even if she wants to sleep with you, like you're just not going to have that drive because you've been cutting off your feelings. And for a lot of guys, the most vulnerable thing is to say to a woman, "I want to fuck you." Like it's not always like vulnerability isn't always soft. Sometimes it's like being more direct.
Wouldn't you agree that being hard, being forward, being dominant requires some degree of vulnerability, or she's going to feel really unsafe? Because if she can't feel you at all and you're really dominant, I mean, I could see her getting really scared, wanting to leave the room.
That's the whole perpetrator thing that gets discussed a lot. Like that's essentially what it is. Like they're being forthright, but not. There's like it's another kind of robot. Like you're not going to feel. There's no connection there, so she's never going to feel like you actually have attention on what she's experiencing, which is part of it too. Like I always say, like if you could break down what makes a man good with women, it's connection and desire. I mean, I say be connected, be selfish, right? It's okay to be selfish if you're connected with the woman and you can match up your desires with hers. A lot of nice guys, they're connected but not selfish enough. So like she's like, this guy is just giving me whatever he thinks I want to see, which is not real, and they don't trust the guy.
Isn't he ultimately he's trying to be selfish, but he's trying to hide his selfishness.
Right. I
think I got that right. Because, I mean, ultimately, I see the nice guy as more selfish than the guy who's straightforward. Because it's all about how can I get and not feel guilty.
Yeah. Right? And he's trying to, circumvent. I mean, instead of putting it on the table, he's trying to like sneak through the back door. The affection and the sex, whatever.
Yeah. I'm going to trick you into falling in love with him. I'm going to trick you into having sex with me. And I'm going to trick you. And they don't feel that way. They think that, the girls are going to get turned on by just being nice. Like if I do everything she wants, she's going to get turned on. That doesn't work. You said something that was really important that I think a lot of guys need to understand. Resentment. I've heard that, I believe was it in Blink where they talk about resentment is the death of every relationship. That there was a guy who studied the level of resentment.
Couples.
Yeah.
You could tell them they're going to divorce within like a 5-second glance or something.
I don't know if it was 5 seconds or whatever, but he would measure the level of resentment in the relationship, and he could tell how long your relationship was going to last. A year, 2 years, 3 years, almost like down to the month or something, some ridiculousness like this. And so they really determined that the level of resentment equaled the length of the relationship. And so I always say you've got to get all the resentment out of your relationship all the time if you want it to last. You can't. You got to constantly be cleaning up the resentments, constantly. I mean, if you guys are in a relationship right now out there and you got a lot of resentments towards your partner, or she's got a lot of resentments towards you, and usually if one side does, the other side does too, then that's the beginning of the end already, and you can feel it. And so
because it's almost a measure of how not on the same page you are, like your level of resentment, because you're feeling emotions that are no longer present. Like you're feeling what she said about you then, and she's feeling about this, and you're not both in this moment together. You're both blaming each other for things in the past, and you're not. Eventually, it's going to show up in your sex life. 100% of the time, it'll eventually show up in your sex life. You're just not going to want to sleep with that person.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, if you get enough resentment, why would you be? She could be the hottest girl in the world, but you're just not gonna. You walk in the room, you're gonna feel heavy. You're gonna feel your heart's missing. You're gonna feel painful because it hurt you so much, or you've been hurt. You've hurt her, vice versa. So that's powerful, and because I think so many guys out there, especially nice guys, are famous for pushing down resentments and saying I'll look at this later, or we'll look at this later, when it never does. Never. Right. What is that old saying? They say on TV shows and all the time. I just saw it on a TV show the other night. Whatever she says, just tell her you're sorry. and then put it behind you. It's easier that way. It's easier if you just say you're sorry, let the woman be right, and you'll be happier, and everybody will be happier. And to me, when I see that on a TV show, that's the worst advice possible.
Yeah, it's the same people giving advice to like, oh, if you are not lasting long enough, get desensitizing cream. Like, it doesn't matter if you feel anything. It doesn't matter if the sex is real. Just like keep up appearances. Like, it's the same bullshit idea, like, perspective.
You don't have to have fun. Just get her off and you'll be good. I'm like,
right.
What's
the point of living if you're not going to feel things?
Like, yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Who cares?
So,
go play a video game then.
So then talk about that. Because you were talking about that earlier. For me, going from a guy that was super numbed out to a guy that can actually immensely enjoy sex now. Can you talk about how far can that spectrum really go for a lot of guys out there that aren't enjoying sex or even stressing over the idea of sex? I run into a lot of guys that the thought of having sex with a woman the first time is the most stressful thing because all these things go wrong for them. How fun can the sex almost be when you get all that handled? You really start to look at that stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, rather than explain it, I'd like to remind people of like remind guys of your first orgasm, which was probably by yourself, right? I'm assuming, unless you were particularly lucky or something like that. I don't know.
I was picturing my first orgasm with a woman, so I'm glad you said that. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, or even that, but like your very first sexual experience where you noted, oh, sex feels really good, or like arousal feels really good. I really, moving towards the female form in whatever way turns me on feels really good. You're not thinking like, oh, I need to be somebody. I need to perform a certain way. I need to impress her. I need to do this many times so that she doesn't become bored with me. Like, you don't have those thoughts when you're first approaching sexuality for the first time. That's what returning to like having like a peak sexual experience is like, but you're an adult and with women or whatever you're into, like that's, to me, like that's
my first sexual experience was horrible. So, I mean, okay. my first masturbating, I could have pleasure. That was how I knew. That's how I knew it was psychological, because masturbating, I could have a lot of pleasure. But when it came to actually having sex with a woman, I couldn't feel a thing. I was totally wanted to. I was so excited. We had sex and I was like, this is it. I was like, it's better masturbating. And yet I still wanted to fuck women. I would see them and I'd say, she's beautiful. Look at her. I mean, I want to be with her. But then when I would do it, it was horrible. And I know exactly what it was. It was toxic shame built up in my body, shame, guilt. And I had so much guilt, so much shame, so much disconnection from women out of guilt and shame over having a sexual desire, because I was an extreme nice guy, that when I looked at them sexually, my body would shut off from the waist down. When they left the room, if they weren't there, I was fine. So say that part again, sorry.
Oh, I think that's really common for guys. Yeah. Like they're seeking sex. A lot of guys are investing so much time and energy and maybe even money in pursuing women, but they don't even like sex. They like the idea of sex, they like talking about sex, they like thinking about sex, they like masturbating, but they don't even enjoy sex with women for the same reasons you're mentioning.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, sex is supposed to feel good. That's why you pursue it. But for a lot of guys, it doesn't even feel good.
Well, how many guys get stuck in the idea of conquest, even though they're not loving the sex, they're not enjoying the sex? I just got to get conquest, because it's a sense of validation. But what about pleasure? How many guys do you think out there, and women, have fucked a lot but never really been fucked or fucked? Do you know what I mean by that?
A lot, yeah. It's hard to tell. I mean, the people who open up about their sex lives to me are maybe a skewed sample of the population, but maybe not. I don't even know. But I know it's a lot. Certainly it's a lot.
I was in a class years ago, a spiritual class. It was a meditative kind of thing. And we'd sit every week and have these discussions. And there was this Tantra teacher in there, and she's fairly famous. And she sat there with this realization that horrified her one day. And she sat up and she said, "Oh my God, I'm a Tantra teacher and I've never really been penetrated." And the teacher said, "Well, can you elaborate on that? Talk about that." She said, "Well, I spent all these years studying sex, teaching sex, having sex with all kinds of people, but I've never really let somebody in. I've never been vulnerable enough to really let somebody fuck me. And I realized I've never really been penetrated." And it kind of devastated her in that moment, because she had been racing so much trying to prove something. That's why she went into sexuality, became a Tantra teacher, did all this stuff, that she never stopped and just was there.
Yeah, and I think that is the norm. So I'd even say to her, like, good on you for realizing it eventually. And maybe you had to do all that. Maybe you had to have all that sex to realize it, because I think most people I think a lot of people will never experience that, never realize like, oh, I've never really let go in a sexual experience.
Oh yeah. I would agree. You can almost feel it off of a lot of people walking down the street. You can almost tell the ones. I mean, you could tell ones. And let me ask you: can you tell when you see people? You can tell ones that are more embodied sexually than aren't. I mean,
Totally. You can see by the way people walk.
Yeah.
You can almost, I mean, I don't know for sure, but you can almost tell like how a woman's in bed by her movements and her expression. Certainly can tell in the beginning, women talk about this all the time. They can tell how a guy is in bed from the way he dances or the way he kisses, like, how you do one thing is how you do everything when it comes to a lot of things, at least.
Yeah. And sexuality is, I mean, it means, this is where I really want to part from just having this sexual pleasure. I want to go a little deeper now. And how much do you think sexuality is important for other aspects of life beyond just pleasure sexually? Like getting out there and well, I'm going to let you answer that question first. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that sexuality has so many other uses than just going out and having sex or making a baby. And,
totally. Yeah. The way I frame it for guys, like first introducing the concept, is just remembering that the whole reason why sex exists in life is to further life. I mean, humans are a sexual species. Like that's why we have genitals. That's why there's men and women. Like that's the purpose. So like that drive, like nature wants you to have that potency because that's like aliveness. Like that, your access to arousal is almost synonymous with your access to aliveness. And we know this anecdotally, like most people we've seen who are extremely charismatic, they also have a reputation of being sexual beings, famous men, famous women even. But down to, a more concrete level, when your arousal is high, and I talk about this with guys with anxiety a lot, like when you're really horny, it's hard to be afraid of things. It's like there's like a certain courage that comes with like, oh, I'm going to make a baby. When your body thinks that, I'm going to make a baby, like there's a certain like determination you have. Like when you have an erection, literally when you have an erection, it's kind of hard to worry about your taxes or whatever bullshit, right? Like you're focused, like you're there to on nature's mission to procreate, right? Not literally, but like that's what your body thinks. So your access to arousal, I mean, it's tied to, creativity. It's tied to your drive, your motivation. Like, and we notice this, like right after you come and your arousal's back down, you don't feel like doing shit. I mean, you're a little more fatigued. You don't have that drive, at least during the refractory period. Some would argue that even after you've ejaculated for many times over maybe weeks or days, you just have a little bit less fight in you. That's why, boxers don't have sex before fights, all that stuff. And a lot of this, is maybe old wives' tales. A lot of it isn't proven scientifically, but most men have noticed something to do with that. Like there's something about being turned on in sex, but also turned on in life.
Well, I've noticed that people who have chronic masturbation, I mean, like every time I feel a little stress, I feel a little like tension in my life, and I want to avoid that stress and tension, I run and masturbate. But those types of men, like I've been that guy in the past. And so that they if they do it enough, they're actually doing it to avoid pain, like the stress of the day, the stress of this, the stress of that, and they end up becoming way less productive and getting way less done in their life and creating less, manifesting less. And then I've also noticed as I've learned to control that energy and take that same turn on, and instead of draining it out of my body, directing it into stuff, I can create so much more. Have you had that experience?
Totally, because like that kind of compulsive urge to masturbate is no different than any compulsion, like substance abuse, eating too much sugar, watching too much TV. Like these are things that are pleasurable, but they reduce our sensation. Or as you talk about, it reduces the tension in your body. Like after you've jerked off to porn, you got no tension left. You got nothing left. Right? You're not feeling anything. You're kind of dead. You don't give a shit. You're apathetic, right? Like you don't like. It's just it's so funny. I would think about this a long time ago, even before I was having sex when I was a kid. It's like watching porn. It's the most important thing in the world. Like there's nothing that can distract me from this porn until right after I come, and I'm like, why was I watching this weird ass thing, or whatever? Like this seems so unappealing now. Right after I mean, and it's not just about coming, right? But really, I mean, arousal or sensation is a currency, just like money. Like you can cultivate it and you can have more and you can invest it and spend it, and you'll have more to deploy in the world. Or you can just deplete it, so you have an empty bank account and you can't really do much. And like that to me is apathy. Like when you've depleted all your feelings, and you don't have any drive to do anything anymore.
Yeah, and people who want to deplete their feelings don't have a good relationship to their feelings. So
Right.
they use masturbation as a way to get away from that. How important do you think? And I also want to talk to some of the people on this call too. But how important do you think when like they talk about using visualization and like Napoleon Hill says, imagine what you want and all that stuff, and you gotta hold your focus on an idea. And this is where I think a lot of people go wrong. And so I want to ask your opinion on it. How important when you're visualizing, when you're like, if I want to build a business, or I want to create a great relationship, or I want to have a great sex life, or I want to create great artwork, or I want to become an amazing athlete, and I'm visualizing every day and I'm picturing it. How important is it to get that visualization hooked to your turn on?
It's super important. And like, it doesn't even have to necessarily be sexual, but like feeling those positive feelings. Like in my arousal control course, one of the exercises I teach is the inner smile, like where you're recreating the feeling of smiling, like in your body, right? And like that in itself, if you tie that to your goal, it's like encouraging your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your relaxed nervous system, or it's the opposite of fight or flight. It's the feed and breed, right? It's like when you're chill, when you can eat, when you have sex, when you can enjoy yourself. It's the deactivated state. When you're viewing your goals from that perspective, it just everything feels pleasurable as opposed to being like wired as like white knuckling through your goals. And it's always going to cause stress if you're always associating fight or flight with doing stuff, right? You're always in emergency mode, and it never feels good. Even if you do the things you want to do, you're going to just feel shitty.
Yeah. And if you're creating a lot of pain around what you're going to do, how long before you destroy what you're going to do?
Right.
It's not going to be around very long. I always love that old I say it all the time, but that old Arnold Schwarzenegger thing that he said in Pumping Iron.
Right.
I'm coming all the time. I'm coming when I'm crossing the street. I'm coming when I'm curling. And that, to me, that says it all right there. I mean, look how successful that guy was.
Yeah.
And,
that was a huge inspiration for me. Like I watched it when I was 16. I was like, I want to live that life. I didn't even know how to get there without me, but like, I was like, that is enlightenment to me. Arnold spoke it,
And look, you're living it right now, man.
Yeah. Pretty
Bali,
close to
Chiang Mai, all these amazing places, traveling the world. And I've seen some of your Instagram pictures. They're awesome.
Thanks.
So I got a couple guys here. I just want to read some of their comments real quick. Reminds me of the show Everybody Loves Raymond, because we were talking about how society today is really telling men just to be, just agree with your woman and make her happy, which actually makes her miserable, by the way, when you always agree with her. I mean, I can't think of any way to make a woman more unhappy. I felt that loving thought of sex. Ryan also said that. I felt that loving thought of sex for conquest more than sex itself. So he enjoyed the idea of conquest, and he went through that. So what are some questions that have been, you guys
I want to make
some
one comment on that, actually, because on, I think, can you still see me? I think I lagged a little bit.
You just went green.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay, guys, hang on one sec. We're having a little bit of technical difficulty here. And but in the meantime, guys, think of some questions. I'm going to get to as many as I can. You guys, last time I couldn't get to all your questions because there's just a lot of them. But right now we don't have any, so so I want to start asking you to start bringing them in now, and I'll throw some in here and there as we go through the conversation, go back and forth, and start discussing different topics. And type them in the chat box, by the way. I didn't say that. So there's a chat box on your screen. Make sure you type them in there, and we'll go from there. But
yeah, I just want to address the conquest thing, because something that came across my radar when I was first studying this stuff, I would meet all these guys who had slept with hundreds of women, like they were maybe very deep in the pickup world, and they were depressed, and they were just like going out every weekend, and they're hooking up more, and they were depressed. And I always thought that was strange, right? Because like I was also kind of depressed, and I thought that if I just slept with enough women, I would be not depressed. Like that was the one thing wrong in my life. And I realized like that is not the case, because if you're always viewing this idea that you need more sexual validation to feel happy, It's like you never get full. It's like the hungry ghost idea from addiction circles. So it's important to note that like there's a certain point, and this is what abundance is, right? Abundance is when you have a little more than you need. And I think we've spoken about this before. Like I knew that I had moved to a new level in sexuality when I could say no to sex sometimes. Like when I actually didn't need to say yes to every single crumb that was thrown at me. And it's important to get into that mindset eventually, whether that number is 10 women or 100 women or 1,000 women. Like at some point you need to get there, because otherwise you'll always be chasing that next hit. And that's no different than jerking off too much. Like it's this external need as opposed to feeling what you're feeling.
Or drinking too much.
Or anything.
I know exactly what you're talking about, because I remember, and by the way, you don't have a picture up. I know. Do you intend to do that?
No. Let me try.
I just got a green screen for you. Okay. I'll talk a little bit about that because I think it's important. I remember, it's still green. I remember when I reached that point where I was dating a lot of women, and I remember one night I didn't have a girl over, and I was like frantically looking for how can I get this girl, any girl, to come over. And I sat back and I thought to myself, this is kind of weird. Why do I need a girl over to be happy tonight? Why can't I just enjoy doing something on my own? And I realized that I was getting a lot of that validation you talk about from the women, and I really needed that validation. And so I took a sabbatical from dating all women. I actually just said, I'm not going to date anymore. And I meant to take about 4 months off. I took like 6 months, I think. And I actually took myself out on dates and learned to enjoy just hanging out with me. And I've given that assignment to a lot of students who have gotten good with women and became addicted. And I think it's essential to reach that point almost where, at first I can't get girls, but then when I start getting a lot of girls and I'm able to date and I'm able to have a good time with women, can you actually stop sometimes? Sometimes some guys need to stop and say, now can I learn to love myself and not need women? Because otherwise you'll be terrible in a relationship if you ever want one, You're gonna lose interest in that girl and need another girl all the time. So.
Totally. Yeah, and a lot of guys get into this and get into the study of women because they feel a lack. But at some point you had to realize like there's other things in life to work on, right? There's other things that matter, like maybe your career, your business, your spirituality, your creativity, whatever it is. Like, I mean, I think it's kind of sad when I see guys who've been doing this for 20, 30 years and all they want to talk about still is getting laid. Like there's nothing you've moved on from. You haven't satisfied yourself at some point. Like there's so much more to life, but it is important. Sexuality is a great starting point, but you don't want to get stuck there. It's like only chapter 1 of a journey.
Well, you can lose all sense of purpose in it, and you can get disillusioned, by the way. You still don't have a picture, by the way, but we may not get you back, but at least we got your voice. You can lose all sense of who you are in it, and that's really, God, that's a terrible thing. I have a few friends like that, and they live for the next whatever with women. Like I had sex with 3 girls at this 1 week, or I did this or I did that. And it's like just a big number to them. And I feel sorry for their lives because I can tell they're not happy. So let's take a few questions. Let's dive in a little deeper. Is there any advice you would give to a man who is, this is from, he didn't give his name here, so he left his first name blank, but is there any advice you would give to a man who is having a hard time accessing his turn on? And I think that's a super important one. That's getting down to the basics, and we should actually dove into that already. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I'd say an exercise I give guys a lot when they're really, really numb to their turn on. They don't even know where to start. I'd start with the phrase "I want." It's the most simple phrase, but a lot of guys, especially nice guys, haven't used that phrase in a long time. I ask guys a lot, like, when's the last time you said "I want blank"? And they're like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like you never say that in the restaurant or when you're ordering a coffee, like, I want this. Like that's the place to start. If you can't even feel your sexuality, just being able to declare your desire to the world reinforces to your mind that what you want, what you personally want for yourself, your selfish desire is valid, it's important, it's worth having attention on. Slowly you'll start to notice other things. You'll start to notice like very specific desires, like, oh, I want to touch her hair in this way. Like, you don't have to say it in your head, but that's where you start. Like, I want blank. And like, that's an exercise I do with myself all the time. If I feel disconnected from my desire or disconnected from my turn on, I'll start saying, I want. Like whenever I'm talking to my assistant, I make sure to frame my request to him in terms of I want blank, because I want to keep in touch with my desire. And at your root, your id, your instinct is basically, your reptilian brain is like, oh, I want this, I want that, is seeking pleasure, avoiding pain. And I'd say that's the most baby step, most elementary way to start getting in touch with your turn on again.
Well, let me ask you a question about that. What happens because a lot of people have wants, right? That they have a huge amount of wants, but the wants are painful, so painful to them that they, because they think about the want and they never seem to get it. So they go into a lot of pain. So then they just kind of give up. So wants for some people are painful. Wants for other people are beautiful and exciting. And there's anticipation towards getting it. What do you say to that group that's in the inside?
Yeah, if the want is painful, they're probably looking at something beyond what they think they can have. Like, oh, I want to sleep with hot women, but everything before that is super scary. I break it down to even something smaller than that. Like, if the want is unpleasant, make it smaller, because there's got to be something there that's pleasurable. Otherwise, you wouldn't want it in the first place. So if, being in bed with a woman is scary or painful or something, what's the smaller version of that? Like, I want to be able to, and sometimes it's even like, I want to be able to enjoy something. I want to look into a woman's eyes and enjoy it. I want to hold the hand. I want to flirt. I want to, be able to approach and make her laugh or something like that. I mean, these are kind of external things, but breaking it down to the most simple nugget, there's got to be something pleasurable in there. And when your pleasure is tied to your intention, that's when you don't have any internal resistance. When it's like pleasurable to approach, there's no worry about approach anxiety. When it's pleasurable to go to the gym, you don't have to stick to your gym routine. You just know you're going to do the thing you want to do. So finding that place where it feels good.
Yeah, and that you kind of said it. You went past it really quick. You said go smaller, because for a lot of guys, their one is too big for them, I think. And I think that even that whole 1% rule we talk about, like, okay, if this want, maybe the one is to get yourself a beautiful girlfriend, and maybe it just seems impossible. What would be a want that you can handle? And I think by what you're saying there is a want you can handle is maybe I could just want to talk to a beautiful girl, or say hi to her, have a conversation, or give her a compliment, and shrink your want down to something that's practical. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And something smaller and more accessible that you have more control over. Like, you might not be able to control a woman sleeping with you this weekend, but you can control talking to someone. You can control getting yourself out of the house. And you just touched on something that's, I think, important. Like, if you're not enjoying all the steps up to your desire, then you're going to be fighting yourself the whole way. Like, if you don't enjoy talking to women, it's going to be really hard to seduce a woman. I mean, if you think of those terms, like, you have to enjoy the process. Like, it's just like the sports analogy. Like, if you really enjoy practice, you're going to be good at the game. And so it's finding, not that it's, this is analogy, obviously, but, if you can enjoy every step of the process, you don't have to worry about internal resistance. You don't have to worry about your fears sabotaging you, because you're just having fun the whole time you're playing. And that's what we all want eventually.
So based on what you're saying, I would say the key here is, can you associate your want with turn on? And if your turn on shuts off when you go into a want and goes into pain, then you need to change it. Find stuff where you can keep some modicum of turn on there while you have a want. Maybe it's something super simple, but start with that and build that turn on up around the wants. Is that a good way to put it?
Totally. Because like mentioning my story again, like when I was in that phase where I was, doing pickup drills a lot and bringing women home, but I couldn't feel any sexual urge in me. I hated the whole club game. I hated it. It was the most painful thing for a shy guy like me to force himself to a club and approach a bunch of sets. Like, I hated it. So I had to really numb myself to push through it. It was work. I didn't see this play. As opposed to now, like, if I'm talking to a woman, it's because I want to, so I'm enjoying it. So whether we sleep together or not, whether anything happens or not, I'm enjoying myself. So there's no pressure, there's no work. I'm just playing and living my life. Nice. And then that takes away the attachment to outcome and stuff, because I'm already doing what I enjoy. So who cares whether there's a payoff later?
I love it. Okay, so let's go to some more questions. Nick wrote in here, do you ever come to Phoenix? No, we don't usually come to Phoenix. I haven't been there for a long time, but we are in Los Angeles if you want to come out to Fearless, and if you want to see Ruwando, he's going to be in Miami with us in November and December. So, let's see. This is an interesting one. Somebody wrote, what's the best way to increase your sex drive?
There's a lot to say about that.
Yeah, there is a lot.
And I would actually have to ask a few more questions of this person, but I'll throw out some things that I apply to most people.
I think this second one comes from him too. It said particularly when he's with a woman, but that might be him, might be somebody else because neither of them put their name in. When you guys don't put your name in, I don't know if for sure if it's you or not. So what's the best way to increase your sex drive, particularly when he's with a woman? So.
Gotcha. Okay. So if you're able to be horny on your own, but not horny with a woman, then that actually narrows it down a little bit because it's not your personal sex drive, right? It's obviously your arousal is there and it works. If that's the case, it's probably some sort of emotional block, like we just mentioned, like Brian, you mentioned from your past example. Like if you're able to be aroused by yourself and not with a woman, there's probably something there. Maybe it's fear, resentment towards women, some shame around showing yourself as a sexual being, owning the fact that yes, you have a dick and you want to put it in her. Like you have these, whatever your desires are. We're not to get raunchy right now, but like admitting to yourself, like what is your thing? Maybe you're in some weird shit, maybe you're not. Like being able to own it and talk about it, I think, is a first step. It's specifically if you're having trouble only with women. And going back to the vulnerability piece, like saying the thing that's on your mind helps. Like for me, we've talked about this before. Like one thing that helped me get over my erection issues was when I was in bed with a woman or even talking to a woman and it seemed like sex might be on the table, I'd bring this up. It was the most shameful, humiliating thing I could talk about. But I'd basically say like, hey, I'm a little nervous because I'm attracted to you, but I've been having this thing over the last few months where I'm not getting it up and it's humiliating. And just saying that takes away the humiliation. It's just like if you're talking with someone, you're feeling awkward and you say, hey, I feel awkward, poof, like the awkwardness is gone. All you have to do is own it. Because when you try to hide it, that's when the creepiness comes out. That's when you become more fake and they start to feel something weird off of you. But also like when you're just telling the truth about the things you're afraid of, it takes all the shame away because there's nothing to hide anymore. So
it's interesting.
Yeah.
What were your reactions like? And by the way, could you try your video one more time just to see if we can get you back?
Yeah, I've been turning it on and off. Yeah, your screen is green on
when it's off, at least we get a picture of you. So maybe just leave it off for a bit because when it's on, we just get a green screen.
Okay, well, it's off now.
So can you talk a little bit about some of the women's reactions to that?
Yeah. So I went into it. I went into this idea of being vulnerable with like kind of like the fuck it's. Like I was almost being a nihilist. Like who cares? My dick doesn't work. Like this is kind of like some curse. Like for the first time in my life, women want to sleep with me and I can't get it up. Like it's some some fable or something. Like I'm cursed or something. And I was just like fuck it. But what I found was 100% of the time, women were cool with it. Some women would actually the ones who really value vulnerability, which is most people at its root would actually open up more and like be like, oh, here's my thing. And like, we'd actually become more connected. But even in the worst case scenario, they'd just be like, oh, okay, well, thanks for letting me know. Because what would happen in the past would be like, I would try to, hide it. I would try to hide this thing I was afraid of. I'd get into bed with a woman, I wouldn't get it up and she would think it was her fault. And then she would get tight or upset and blame me. And then I would get more insecure and then blame her and became this cycle of resentment within a moment, within a sexual act, which is the worst thing. As opposed to just being open about it. And she's like, oh, this is his deal. I'm not going to take offense. I don't think less of him. You'd be surprised how accommodating, I don't know if accommodating is the best word, but how accommodating people are, not just women, just human beings, when you put your weapons down, when you put your guard down, people like the natural reaction is to also soften. And we're afraid of them being hard while we're soft, but that's pretty rare.
It's a really tough thing I could see for guys to do, but I could see it being so powerful. I've mainly had the other experience where I was numbed out, and I've only had a few experiences where I couldn't get hard, and there was always a good reason for it. One was right after I broke up with somebody. Literally, I was completely mad in love with this girl. We broke up, and I was just mad, depressed. And I thought it's a long time ago. I thought if I went and had sex with another woman, it would help me with that. And I tried to, and it just, my body wouldn't get hard. It was like, wrong girl. You're with the wrong girl. I knew exactly what it was. and so I think that could be a powerful tool. I always say, just putting it out there is so powerful for your mental health, and it really takes the power back in a lot of ways. if you can learn to accept her reaction no matter what and just put it out there, it makes you so much more of a confident man in the end.
Yeah, and I think that applies to every part of life. Like, I mean, like being vulnerable in your self-expression, like on YouTube or however you express yourself. Like being able to own, like, this is who I am. Here's the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is everything about me, and I'm not ashamed of anything or your criticisms. It just, I mean, one, you just come off as a baller, but you also feel great. Like it's almost like the greatest act of self-love is to expose yourself and not give a fuck.
I agree. Yeah. I think the more vulnerable you can be, like the true confidence is being totally vulnerable and owning your emotions and not saying, please fix me at the same time. Saying, I'm a man, I can handle it. And these are my honest emotions. And this is what I'm really feeling. Because most guys, when they get vulnerable, they're like, is that okay? Do you like that? Can you please fix me? And that's where it all goes wrong. Now own your shit, and that's true confidence. Walling off is not confidence. Anybody can do that. Okay, I got another question here. Let's take a look at this one. Could you talk more about the practical ways to transfer turn on and arousal from sexual urges into productivity? That's a great question. And creation outside of sex. Whenever I stop masturbating, I find myself being horny and distracted by sex when trying to work rather than being more productive. That's Ryan. Thanks for the question, Ryan.
Yeah, I have a whole course on it actually, because there's a lot of exercises. Like Brian, I know you teach different physical grounding exercises to deal with. I mean, it works for any feelings, right? Dealing with anxiety, dealing with any, being able to ground your emotions. And the way I frame it is like you don't want to get rid of your emotions because that would be numbing, and that has all the negatives we've been speaking about. But you want to have a huge container for all your emotions. Like when you can and this goes for arousal too, like any feelings. Like if you can have a really big container to handle all your feelings, it becomes you have less of an urge or a compulsion to masturbate or ejaculate or anything. There's also different exercises. I mean, one good resource to look at is the Multi-Orgasmic Man by Mantak Chia. He has some exercises on drawing the energy and cycling it through your body so that it's not stuck in your genitals where it's very uncomfortable and you're going to feel like you need to have sex or watch porn or something. I teach different exercises through my courses. But you can look up some of the stuff like that. I mean, those physical exercises are really great. If you don't have access to courses like that, like exercises like Qigong, certain types of yoga will help you expand your physical container so you can handle more feelings in your body, essentially. So you can feel the arousal, but it won't run you.
Nice. Have you read the Enlightened Sex Manual by David Deida?
I have not.
I think that's also, it's along the lines of Mantak Chia's book, a little different, but there's some similar stuff in it. It's a more tantric versus a Taoist approach, and I think it's a pretty good book too. I think the two together can be a great read.
I think everything I've seen along those lines, it's essentially about drawing the energy to higher parts in your body, like literally higher in your body, which perhaps correlates to different. I mean, depends how much you believe in like the energy side, the mystical side of energy. But yeah, moving the arousal out of your genitals will definitely allow you to direct it towards other things rather than feeling like you need to come.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. And this is something that I think is so important, that it's such a subtle thing that most guys try it once or twice or a couple times and then they just don't do it anymore. And because they say, oh, I don't feel anything, or I didn't get it, or it's not quite working yet. This is something you got to put, usually, unless you're energetically sensitive, you're true energetic, you're going to have to put a little time into. And it'll go, and this has been my experience, it'll go from not feeling anything at all one day to suddenly, whoa, I'm starting to feel shit. It felt like there was nothing there for a while, and now suddenly I'm feeling something. What is that? And have you had that experience yourself?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been practicing like the Mantak Chia stuff on and off for many years, and only in the last year or so did I really start like giving myself a regimen to really, really see what happens when you recycle your arousal as opposed to coming it away. And it's so clear now, and that's why I made a course on it recently. But it's so clear now that when I've been having sex and experiencing arousal and not coming every time, not coming most of the time, like I really do feel a more aliveness. And going back to our very first topic today, like that's like your access to turn on for life, right? Like you're bringing your sexuality to the rest of your life. Like you have more onness or more aliveness, more thirst, because some part of your body wants to create more life through your sperm, but really it's that you could create your life through anyway, as opposed to coming frequently as I did from puberty for many years, like coming every day or multiple times a day, jerking off, whatever. You're just depleting yourself. And most men, because porn is such a habit for most people, most men don't even realize there's an alternative. They just think that like their kind of apathetic, blasé, depressed state is normal because they've been coming every day or like watching porn every day their whole life. They don't realize that if they just stop doing that, they'll have so much more urge. And I think, like NoFap is like a big movement, and I think they're a little short-sighted. Actually, I'm not knocking NoFap, but I think there's way more to your sexual arousal than just not jerking off. That's a great first step, but I mean, learning to invest your arousal the way we're talking with these exercises, will bring that into the rest of your life as opposed to just not depleting.
Yeah, well, you got to get used to feeling it before you can direct it, And I think the NoFap is kind of like the part of, get used to feeling your sexual energy. And then but that next stage is what you're talking about. That's where the real power comes in. There's a great DKU. Do you know who DKU is? Martial artist. He's getting really popular, They say he's the Korean Bruce Lee, super fast, lightning fast. And I took a seminar from him in Romania. Fascinating because he talked a lot about similar principles that I talk about, but he said it in a slightly different way. And I loved it. So I adopted some of his ideas and I really took a look at them. But he was saying that, first you have muscle tension where you're trying to force everything with the punches. Then you learn to relax completely and everything's fluid and flows. Then the third stage is once you've learned to relax and not fight yourself, not fight your own muscles in your body and flow, then you learn to channel energy. Usually, and he was talking about the Dantian, you channel it in the Dantian, actually the sacrum, and you shoot that energy through your body so that actually energy causes the body to snap and cause the snapping motion that he does. And that's what causes his extreme speed. He says it was the same thing that would cause Bruce Lee's extreme speed. It's not him moving the body as much as the energy moving the body, causing the snap and the charge. So he's literally directing energy through his punches and his strikes. And if you watch videos of him online, just look up DKU. He's usually wearing red. There's videos of him, like guys are wearing motorcycle helmets and he's knocking them back onto the ground, knocking the face masks off their helmets, and he's just devastating when he hits people. And I think that's what you're talking about here, but you're talking about more in a sexual way, and I'm talking about like more in like transfer that turn on and deliver that turn on. Is that correct?
Yeah, because like I think you have a good point, and I forget this sometimes when this is like the first time a guy has heard this, it can seem like kind of an emperor's new clothes thing. Like, what are you talking about feeling arousal outside of my genitals? Like, what are you talking about, like moving energy? What is this nonsense? And I'd say, like, to your point, it takes some time to feel anything. Just like if you go to a yoga class for the first time and they're talking about, whatever, your prana or noticing your breath, it might seem like ridiculous. Like, what's the point of this? But if you give it time, everyone finds that there's some benefit there because there is more to life than just, the concrete stuff. And I think, even if you're adverse to this stuff that might seem mystical, just looking at human relationships, a lot of this can be seen or observed in emotions. Like, how you feel certainly affects how other people treat you. And if that's as far as you can go, that's fine, because certainly, cultivating feeling in your body as opposed to depleting it will give you more energy. It will give you a little more vibrance. It'll be contagious. And at the very least, that's a great place to play with this stuff.
Yeah, it's a very powerful place. Let's dive into the next question. We got Alexander here. He's got a long one, so I'm going to see if I can shrink it down. We'll see. We'll dive in. I feel I've mastered connection, sex, seduction, yet I have very hard time transitioning from neutral to sexual with a stranger. So hard for me, I don't even try. I generally meet girls online. When I go to meet them in person afterwards, I have no anxiety, extreme openness, and deep connection. It is so natural. Then, close to 100% rate, I ravage them, and they think they never had better sex or connection or conversation. But he's afraid to do it from approaching, basically. He needs to know they want him. And he gets that, and I've run into this with a lot of guys, through online dating, they through conversation, through emails, they get a sense of the girl's personality and what she likes and doesn't like, and they feel safer. But walking up to a stranger, you just don't know what you're getting. Is she gonna accept who I am? I already know this online girl is accepting my personality because she's accepting it through online. Maybe we had a phone conversation, maybe we didn't, whatever. But I've got through that first part, right? But walking up to a stranger and just bringing your turn on right away is a whole nother level of confidence and vulnerability. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think that's really common. I feel that. I mean, I think a lot of men can relate to that. Like once you have permission, a lot of things change. And I've heard this from women actually, because like I think a lot of guys don't realize that dating is hard for women too. It's not hard in the beginning because traditionally women are the choosers. You know, if you look at dating in the way that most people look at it. But once the guy knows that the girl is into him,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of women say they lose their power. Like that's where they become stressed. Like, oh, once he knows that I like him, now I have like he just is totally relaxed and is no longer trying to get my attention. And like that's where women start to feel stressed typically. And I think for men, like once you have that permission, because like from that question, it sounds like once the guy has permission, he feels great. He's on.
Yep.
He can go into God mode. He can be himself. He can be authentic. All that stuff. But until he has that permission, he feels like he's maybe a creep. So I'd say the thing, I mean, this kind of relates to self-validation, self-love. When you can give yourself permission, and it's easier said than done, but if you can like focus on this, like giving yourself permission to be who you are without needing, oh, hey, you can come approach me now, or hey, you can be sexual with me. It doesn't mean that you impose your sexuality on people because maybe some women don't want your sexuality, but being willing to put yourself forward and give yourself permission to at least put it out there. Of somehow communicating directly or indirectly, I'm interested in you sexually, and then seeing if they're going to give you permission. Like you have to at least give yourself permission for that, because it's very rare that a woman is going to randomly say, "Hey, come run your game on me," right? That's not going to happen usually, right? You have to self-validate there, and part of that, comes back down to stuff we've been talking about this whole time, like giving yourself permission to be sexual, express your desires, even non-sexual desires.
I think it all comes down. I mean, don't you think a lot of that comes down to self-esteem? I think a lot of that comes down totally to how you feel about your self-worth, self-esteem, your self-love. I got to make sure you're safe before I really drop my guard with you. That says something about how you feel about yourself.
Right.
Yeah. And that to me is huge. And that is really the whole reason I do this work, is it comes down to, can we get people to truly be themselves with strangers, with everybody, just to really be real and honest all the time. And and not apologize for who they really are deep down inside. I'm not talking about being mean or hurting people. I'm talking about being real with people. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. And sometimes it does hurt to be really honest, but then people respect you more,
Yeah.
And you bullshit.
Yeah. And like, people, I mean, ultimately will treat you the way people take cues on how to treat you, right? Like if you're acting like a victim, you're going to create perpetrators. If you're acting like a leader, you're going to create followers. Like, and down to the self-esteem piece that you're speaking about, the self-love, like if you are validating yourself, maybe you'll get some pushback in the beginning. Once in a while, someone might not be cool with how confident and like how self-assured you are, but eventually almost everyone will get down to it, because, most of the time how we treat each other is based on cues we get from the outside. And I want to say something like the self-love piece. I never considered that until I spoke with you. I don't know if you remember, we had a short conversation maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I was achieving some success, but I was having like some like internal turmoil and I was challenged. I don't know if you remember this conversation at all, but you kind of pointed out to me that I wasn't loving myself. And it was this like very eye-opening thought, because I never considered that. I never even considered that like a man would point this out to me, but it was a huge game changer for me to realize I can validate myself and no longer be at the mercy of, these external successes.
But kind of curious, how did you do that? How did you start doing that? Because one of my methods for doing that is, meditation and releasing, really going deep into where I don't think I'm as good at. I'll literally bring up people that make me feel that where I think I feel less than them, and then I start really feeling all the emotions and letting them go, and just going through a meditative process with that. So can you talk about what your process was for that you used? I'm glad we had that conversation. That's awesome, by the way. So
yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, there's like all these internal work exercises. Like I know, releasing that you teach, like the Sedona method type stuff is great. But for me, I think honestly, personally, I've done maybe too much of that when I was younger. Like maybe too focused on the internal stuff. So for me, a lot of it is how I take action, because if I'm tempted to do something compulsive, I can ask myself, is this an act of self-love? Is drinking or masturbating or doing something that I know is going to distract me from what I intend to create in my life, is that an act of self-love? No. Usually it's an act of self-hatred, these compulsive behaviors, as opposed to like, oh, if I actually get up at the time I wanted to get up and do the things I promised myself I would do, whether it's going to the gym or doing my one priority for the day, like these little things, they add up. And something one of my friends, he's a coach, Rob Candell, says all the time is self-esteem is built through esteemable acts. Like every time you do something that you know you can be proud of, whether it's for yourself or even helping other people, you're giving yourself like that, like you said, a 1% boost, like a 1% boost in self-esteem. Like, okay, I love myself a little more because I'm doing this thing that's congruent with self-love, as opposed to, eating junk food when you have a fitness goal is clearly not an act of self-love. That's an act of self-sabotage. That's an act of self-hatred, actually. And it's only going to promote this feeling of self-loathing because you're not respecting yourself in reality, in action. So taking these esteemable acts, taking action in a way that supports what you actually want to create is the ultimate act of self-love, in my opinion.
Yeah. I would say there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I love the internal, but I think you mix the internal with the external. The internal should drive the external. If the external is not being driven by the internal, then taking an external act, which will bring up the internal feelings, then you can start letting them go. I mean, you can go either way. Like if I go up to a beautiful woman and say hi, and I feel really insecure, then I have something to work with. Oh, I feel insecure talking to her. Okay, I can start letting that go. I can start meditating. And then if I at the same time, once I get it solid inside, I'm going to start to feel good walking up to women. So it's kind of, they work together. So beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, and one thing on the internal side that is very simple, and it's related to the Sedona releasing stuff, is simply letting yourself off the hook. I think a lot of guys, like you were just mentioning with approaching, they'll do the right action, but then blame themselves for how they didn't do it well enough, or there's like, oh, I wasted my last years, and they'll get stuck. It's basically a form of resentment where you're feeling old feelings over again, as opposed to forgiving yourself, being like, okay, I messed up yesterday, but I'm going to take action today, as opposed to continually blaming yourself for yesterday, which is going to cause you to mess up again today and tomorrow. Like you got to let go. Yeah.
Half the clients I see, at least maybe 3/4 do that when they first come in the door, and stopping them from doing that. Oh, I beat myself up because I think it makes me better, because the more I beat myself up, the harder I work. And I'm like, no, the more you slow yourself down. Beating yourself
it's kind of
up
like this Puritan.
Harder, huh?
Yeah. It's like this Puritan ethic that's in our culture.
Yeah. It's a weird thing. You're right. It's embedded in a lot of cultures, I think. Okay, we got a couple more questions here I'm going to go over, but before I do, and I'll let you guys know out there, I won't always be able to go through all your questions. I'm going to do my best. We only usually have about an hour. We're a little over an hour now, and I do my best, but we have to keep in a certain time frame. And as we get more and more people listening, it gets hard to get to all the questions, but we do the best we can. So we got 3 more here, but what I want to do first is Cairo's going to put up an offer. If you really want to see Ruwan in person, you want to learn more about this, and you want to meet Zan, and you want to meet Matt Artisan, you want to meet myself, and you want to meet Dave, my business partner, and the whole team of people that really make all this come together, and all the coaches. Then we have an event coming up at the end of November. You'll see it in the offer, the dates and everything. End of November, beginning of December in Miami. That is going to be something I've been wanting to put on for years. It's bringing together people that I really consider to have talent in this area. They have natural skill, that aren't teaching routines, patterns, techniques, but are teaching guys to be confident, teaching guys to have self-esteem, teaching guys to have love, teaching guys about energy, teaching guys what it is to be an awesome complement to the confident women. And that's what this program's about. It's about every guy's going to get up there and talk about how to create amazing experiences with women, how to create amazing relationships, and how to create an amazing sex life with women, to be so much so that any woman that was in the room would agree 100%. We're going to have some women there too, but they would agree 100% with what they're talking about. There's nothing we need to hide. There's nothing we need to be embarrassed about, because we're here to be the best man for women we can be. And if you want to be that guy, you want to be a guy that's not a nice guy and not a dick, but he's real, he's natural, he's honest, he's authentic, then this is definitely the event for you. Make sure you check it out. So the offer's up on the screen, or it should be. I can't see it from my end, but I know that Cairo's got that in and handled. And why that offer's up there, while you guys are checking it out, I'm going to go over the last few questions for you guys. Let's see. This one, this guy says, I'm not sure who this is, but he says, always make sure you write a name in there or something if you can, guys. I second Ryan's question with this add-on. What is the best way to deal with sexual energy without masturbating? When you have all that energy, but let's say it's not the ideal moment to start a project business, have faith that the sacrifice will make tomorrow better. So he's saying, I don't have anything to do with my energy, but should I just not He's got this impression that he shouldn't masturbate at all or shouldn't ejaculate at all, I think. Can you talk a little bit about that, even if he's got no project to put the energy into?
Yeah, I mean, if you've decided for whatever reason that you need to be cultivating your arousal, there's got to be something, right? Like, I can't imagine, I mean, unless you're in a depleted state, that you have no drive. And maybe, I don't know, your history, maybe you're so depleted that you really can't feel anything even after weeks of cutting out your compulsions. Or maybe you need to look at the rest of your life. I mean, just stopping masturbating, but watching too much TV, eating too much sugar, drinking too much alcohol, smoking too much, like it's going to have the same effect. But if you're cultivating your energy, or if you're not wasting it, if you're not wasting your arousal, you're not wasting your attention, something's going to come up, because as a sentient human being, you're going to find something that calls your attention, that you find interesting, that it might not be a project or a $1 million business idea. It might not be your life's calling, but maybe it's a skill. Maybe you get interested in martial arts. Maybe you get interested in weightlifting. Maybe you get interested in some obscure thing or a community service project or some way you can help people. Or I mean, this is how I found my career, like coaching. Like, I just had free time and attention, and I found a lot of joy in helping people achieve their goals. And that became my career. Like, you never know. So if you've actually cultivated your energy, and you give yourself space to feel things, you'll find something to put that into. Like, there's no way you're just going to sit like a lump if you're not masturbating. You're going to find something to do. So that's what I would say. Give yourself space.
There's a thing David Data used to say, and you kind of just reminded me of it. He would say, if you don't have a sense of purpose, go get a tent and put it in your backyard, or put it out in the forest or somewhere, and just go. Actually said backyard. Just go sit in it with nothing, no book, no phone, no anything, and don't distract yourself. Don't sit there and bring a book or anything like that. Just sit and just be. And he said, and wait until this drive comes over you to do something that is greater than you. And he says, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to think, oh, I need to go take care of this. I need to take care of that. I need to pet the dog. He says, unless it comes with a greater sense of purpose, like a part of you that is really driven, don't do it. Ignore all of them until you realize this is something that comes from inside me at a deep level and not just a distraction. And he said, the first thing that'll most likely come up when you do that is the urge to pee. And he goes, don't do it. Wait until that urge becomes so great you have to go pee, and then you'll understand what purpose is. And then if you sit there and stay 100% present, you will eventually find the next thing that you were supposed to do. And then sit there and because what he's saying there is that we spend all day distracting ourselves, so that's why we can never find our purpose. And I think it's a powerful thing he said there. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I believe that. And this is kind of maybe a little tangential, but so I really, really believe in intermittent fasting. Like, of all the things that I really think it's beneficial, I'm not going to get into why, but one question I get I think it's great. It's a natural way. But I think, one question I get from people a lot is how could you go 20 hours without eating? Like, don't you get hungry? Don't you get, what's the word, hangry that people say? And I'll say, yes, the sensation of hunger comes up a little bit. But if I'm interested in what I'm doing, the sensation of hunger goes away really fast. And when I'm actually hungry, that's when I eat. But I think a lot of people don't want to feel the empty space of giving themselves an opportunity to feel that thing, as you're saying, coming from within, that thing that they really care about. So they let every little thing pop up that could possibly distract them. Like every Facebook notification, every ding from your phone, every little bit of oh, I need to pee now, I need to drink water, I need to eat another sandwich. You don't actually need to do that. If you give yourself space, you'll find what you really want to do. And when you're really doing what you want to do, then you don't care about these little things that don't really matter. You don't need to eat every hour when you're doing something that matters to you. And that just reminded me of the thing you just said, because it's so important, finding the thing that you actually care about. Most people don't know.
To really find that purpose, you got to cultivate presence, and letting go of all those distractions is that's what fasting does. Is you're letting go of tons of distractions, And then you start to realize more and more what presence is when you're not being distracted by every little goddamn thing that comes up all day long.
Totally.
Okay, let's read Adrian, excuse me. We've got two more. So Adrian, advice for an introvert who doesn't really like clubbing and bars. I've been practicing approaching women on the street with some successes, but would you say it's necessary to go to clubs, bars, or better to reach out in alternative settings that are more suited to introverts, to an introvert's strengths?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different perspectives, because on the one hand, if you want to get good at approaching, you need reps. And this is kind of the more traditional pickup view on it. I mean, and the club is, unless you live in a place where there's a lot of opportunity to talk to people on the street, then yeah, the club is probably a good place to get your reps. And even though I maybe had some negatives, I am grateful for the times I've spent like kind of being an approach machine or whatever. That said though, like, I think what a lot of guys don't realize when they're in that approach phase is that there's more than one way to meet women. There's many ways, and you don't have to do the hardest thing. You don't even have to get good at cold approach. I mean, if you have a social circle, for instance, or like if you have, if you're head of a community, there's many different ways to meet people and have them come to you. So I don't know if those things are available to you, but I'd say approaching is great for developing the skill, handling the tension, overcoming your fear. But ultimately, the best way to meet people is like the more normal ways, like going to social events, cultivating a social circle, meeting people through your friends. And I'll say one of the things that contributed to me actually having an abundance mentality with women was getting a lot of female friends where I could see them as humans as opposed to an obstacle to overcome, or like a set of my fears. I could actually be like, oh, like, yeah, these are normal women. And, you know, you can meet women through women all the time. But as far as alternative settings, like personally, I'm still pretty introverted. Like I don't even like parties. Like if there's more than 6 people in the room, I don't feel super at ease. Like there's many ways to create a social life that feels good to you, where you also can meet women. And I'd have to ask you more questions personally to see what would be best for you. But getting in touch with a community that is vibing with your values. I don't know if there's any activities you do. If you live in a big city, there's probably a lot of things you could be doing that's more suited to you, because it depends. Like, do you want to be an ultimate Casanova, or do you want to just be, or not just, but do you want to have sex and relationships and do other things with your life? I mean, that's the question. So if you're really low on the skill set, you're going to have to work on your skills too. But once you reach a level of proficiency, there's no reason why you have to be good at club game, right? You can meet women in a million different ways and do other things.
That are phenomenal with meeting women and dating and confidence that just don't go to clubs, period. You know, I don't think it's necessary. And, you know, especially unless you just want to meet party girls. I mean, if you just want to meet party girls, that is one of the best places to meet them. But yeah.
And I'll speak for myself. Like, I haven't been in a club in years, and like, you know, I'm traveling as you mentioned, Brian, and you know, I meet women on Tinder sometimes, but also on the street and in yoga and like going to events. Like most of the women I've, you know, connected with this year, I've met through friends that I met on this. Like, you know, it's just, if you're being social, you'll find people, and you can be social on your own terms, I guess is what I want to say. Like, almost always when I'm hanging out with people, it's in small groups, it's in a one-on-one, whether it's a girl, a guy, a date, a non-date. And you know, that's how you can build a social circle too, even when you're traveling or whatnot. So I wouldn't force yourself to do this unpleasant activity if it's really unpleasant. However, the thing to note is if you're only doing it out of fear, if you know that it would benefit you to cold approach, then you should probably explore that as well.
Yeah. There's growth in so many directions where your aversions, you got to do it properly. When you look at your aversions, there's so much growth in all of them. So the last question before we close out, because we're over an hour. This is from Dominic. It says, hi Brian, Ruwando and Cairo. Part of me does not want to share this. I had an experience recently where I matched with a girl on Tinder, and as I talked to her, I realized she was a spammer. As I told her I wasn't interested in what she was offering, I expressed some of my frustrations with the app, and she sort of belittled me, saying that was not her problem. Looking at her Instagram, I could see that she has freedom in her life, as a model, cam girl, etc. And I felt both admiration, jealousy, and anger because she has abundance and I do not. I guess that my exercise in trying to be vulnerable backfired because I'm wondering how men can channel these emotions as they work towards becoming a third stage man. So it sounds like he tried to be vulnerable on Tinder to this girl he hadn't met, and he's saying it backfired. That's my guess from what he wrote there.
Gotcha. I think I understand. So the truth is, you weren't fully being vulnerable, or you weren't really owning. It sounds like you're using vulnerability as a technique. I should say that. That's a better way to put it. You're using vulnerability as a technique to get something, which is not what we're talking about in terms of exposing yourself and being okay. We talked about this earlier with like validating yourself and loving yourself and being like, this is who I am. Here you were using it as it sounds like, I might be reading into this too much, but it sounds like you're hoping she would validate you back by being vulnerable or be vulnerable back. And that's not really, if that's your expectation, you're not really being vulnerable, because the whole idea with vulnerability, why we even call it vulnerability, is that you're exposing yourself to risk. You're exposing yourself to the possibility that you're being vulnerable to a woman and she's going to be a bitch back. Like, that's always a possibility, right? Not always going to happen. I think it happens less often than we fear. But part of being vulnerable is the willingness to have a shit reaction. Because then that's you truly owning yourself, truly owning how you feel, and not being subject to how she reacts to you. So if you're hoping to get a reaction or hoping to get a specific thing, you're really using it as a technique, and it's not really being vulnerable.
Yep, that's well said. Perfect. And I love that you said the whole idea of vulnerability is exposing yourself to risk. It's beautifully said. So I want to thank you for being on the call. It was awesome. And I don't know what time it is in Chiang Mai, but what time is it there anyways? I'm kind of curious.
It's 9:47. So this was a great way to wake up. So thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. So I want to thank Ruwando for being here from Chiang Mai, 9:47 in the morning. I want to let you guys know and remind you that we're going to be having several more of these calls every Thursday. There'll be a different time, so watch out for the time slot with different speakers. And make sure to check out the event if you haven't checked it out. Ruwan's going to be speaking. I'm going to be speaking. Zan's going to be speaking. Dave Stoltz is going to be speaking. Matt Artisan. And then we're going to have some fearless coaches out there helping you guys out too, some of the fearless models. And it's going to be an amazing event, something I've been looking forward to putting together for years, with guys that really get this stuff. And if you guys want to be in the energy of guys that get it, this is the place to be. One of the fastest ways to change your life and to really make a big difference is to get in the energy of people that get it, and make friends with like-minded people. And this is the place to do it. And then the other thing is Miami has so many beautiful women. If you love Latinas and European women, that's definitely a place to be. So with that said, make sure I think we're going to have this up on YouTube. So if you're there on YouTube, make sure to comment, and because we're constantly answering those questions, and we'd love to get your questions answered. With that said, thank you, Ruwan, and maybe I'll see you in Chiang Mai soon. I think that would be it. Hang out with you and Aubin and everybody else. And,
awesome. We'll love that.
We'll all go out and do some videos and put it up on YouTube of us running around. And anyways, I'll talk to you soon. If not, well, I guess I'll talk to you in Miami, if not sooner. Sound good, buddy?
Sounds great, man.
Awesome. Okay, take care, guys. We'll talk to you later.
All right, later.